Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. This is going to be a special show today. Sree Sreenivasan and I are reviewing the newspaper together. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along, occasionally the guest host. I guess I'm the guest. Not quite sure how that works, but Sree and I are going to kick it old school. We used to do this where we actually looked through all the sections of the paper, looked at all the articles, all the features. We're going to be doing that today, and we're really looking forward to it. We've been producing this show for 7.5 years. Sree started by himself with Facebook. I joined about 5.5 years ago. And about 3 years ago now, we started producing over StreamYard, which has allowed us to go live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website all at the same time. So please get ready for a great show. For those of you who've missed various sections and the detailed look, you're in for a treat today. I'm going to play a quick video, and like I say, it's a quick video, and then I'm going to ask for your feedback on it in just a bit. Here's the preview that I recorded yesterday. This week on Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along, Sree and I will be reviewing the paper together. We'll take a deep dive into the Sunday print edition and take a look at some features we haven't had a chance to look at in a while, including social cues, the ethicist, the poem, and more. That's it. That was the quick preview. Usually we go for about 2 minutes, so I'm curious about what you think about that and how that worked for you. Let's welcome a few guests who are watching. Deborah Kerr has joined us from Fort Lauderdale. Happy Sunday, and the sun is shining there. That is great to hear. Our friend Doug Levy is joining us from California, and nice to see the old school style show. Let's go ahead and bring on Sree Sreenivasan on that note. Sree, Doug is appreciating the old school approach.
Yes, I'm so happy to see everybody and to be with all of you. Jonathan Borstein's watching from Phoenix, where the hotel shop hasn't sold a newspaper for at least 3 years. I don't know how you're surviving there, Jonathan, without the paper. You, like me, love the print newspaper while also loving digital stuff. Folks, if you haven't seen this before, every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we read the Sunday New York Times. We usually have a guest, which means we spend a lot of time talking to the guests, and we love doing that, but we don't get to do that deep dive into the paper like we used to do. And now we're going to get a chance. It's just Neil and me this time, but it's also you. Please jump in. Please post your comments if there have been things that you want to talk about in the news. And this is not really just about the New York Times. This is about the value of newspapers and journalism at all levels and in all places. And so in the past, we have done readings and read-alongs with editors at the Washington Post, at the Chicago Sun-Times, the Toronto Globe and Mail, the Khaleej Times in the UAE. And we want to continue doing these because we love print, we love what it stands for accuracy, for the fight against misinformation and disinformation. And that's why we've been doing these. It's been, as you heard Neil say, more than 7 years of reading the newspaper out loud. And today there's so much going on in the news that we're going to get to talk about. But tell us where you're watching from. Tell us how your Sunday is going. Tell us what you've been reading or looking at in the news. And if you have any questions, there's a good chance for us to chat about it as well. And we have lots of great shows coming up in the weeks and months ahead. So tune in on Sundays. And if you have a friend who likes the news, who likes the importance of valuable news reporting and journalism, tag them right now or forward this to them. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and our website at digimentors.group. And you will be able to have your friend watch it live, or as soon as we're off the air, it'll be on again and play immediately on all of those channels. And look who's watching. Sudha Parekh's here watching from Tampa, next time in New York. And Sudha is Neil's mom, and we love that she watches with us. My mom was a regular viewer as well. She passed in January. I was blessed to be standing with her when she did, and it was a very special opportunity for me to be with her. She's the one who, among many different things, bought a typewriter for me at the age of 11, Neil, and taught me the value of typing, learning how to touch type on a manual typewriter. And I didn't know why that would be a useful skill, but it certainly became one. And when we mention parents and the show, we always mention Neil's father, who was an amazing man, Prakash Parekh, who ran his own newspaper in the Indian community, but he also loved the New York Times and the Sunday New York Times. Neil tells the story so well about how he asked to have the paper in the Sunday edition in his casket
when he was cremated. One of his final wishes. I mean, this is something we grew up with, at least, and I miss it in New York. For those of you in the New York area, you get your paper delivered in the blue bag, and we grew up getting it and reading it every day. So that's always been a part of our lives. And wherever I've traveled, when I've been away for the summer, when I've been at school, etc., the New York Times was always part of my routine. I remember spending a summer in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I used to go out to a particular cafe at the mall every day for lunch because I could get the New York Times at a Starbucks back then, or it was a bookshop there every day. So yeah, New York
Well,
Times
how
is
this works,
important.
yeah, how this works is we'll be reading the paper and then talking about the stories and things that catch our eye. And we'll also be sharing links. And that's also a chance for us to tell us about our production help. By the way, first say hi to Diana, who's watching from the Bay Area. It's only 5:38 in the morning. She and Doug Levy are among our California watchers live. There are many California watchers who do watch later. But go ahead, Neil.
Remember, Jonathan is up early today too.
That's
He's
true. That's
traveling,
true.
first
That's
trip
true.
in a while, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
And he's a great solo traveler, and so he writes about that. So check out his writings about being a traveler, solo diner, and a solo traveler.
I do want to thank Doug for his comment on the promo video. Short is good. I'll share, Doug. I was wavering back and forth on whether or not to do any kind of video for today, since we didn't have a formal guest. But the music has become such a part of the show. It's a bit of branding. When we hear that little song, we know that we're ready to go. Let's see who else is joining us. And Naomi is joining us from the Upper West Side. Glad to see Sree back in action. Absolutely. Ted Coltman is watching from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ted. And Paula Kiger is watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Hi, Paula. Paula was in Washington, D.C. I think last week. And she, of course, helped produce the show for a number of years. Thank you so much, Paula.
Well-deserved break.
Yes, and
She got her Sunday mornings back.
she will be joining us on occasion when we
Yeah.
need her. So thank you for that, Paula. Devyani Kapoor is joining, saying hello to Sree. Excited to be part of the show and to get some insights. Watching from India. I think Devyani might be a first-time commenter. I don't know if she's been watching for a while, but thank you for joining us.
Devyani is a fabulous friend of mine who we went to school together in India, and she's got a great nonprofit doing really important things. And Devyani, looking forward to talking to you. Neil, before we get to the paper, I did
Sure.
want to look at something from yesterday's paper. So those of you who have lived in New York know that the Sunday paper is so big that you can't read it on Sunday alone. So they deliver half the paper on Saturday with the Saturday paper. Half of the Sunday sections come on Saturday. So we obviously don't get to look at the Saturday sections in our Sunday show. But there was a story in yesterday's front of the business section, which got a lot of attention over the week. Amazon pauses work on campus in Virginia. The HQ2 plans are shelved amid a tech slowdown and a rethinking of office life. So I wanted to ask Neil, as our resident Virginian, about what that means, if anything, to the people he knows, how much excitement there was about the headquarters coming there and the jobs and things like that. And so, Neil, if you have any thoughts on this, let me know. And how far away from this is your home?
Absolutely. So we live in Springfield, Virginia, about 20 minutes from. I think they were trying to rebrand the area as National Landing, if I'm not mistaken. It's
Hmm.
near the airport. It's in Arlington somewhere. That might be referenced in the paper in the article. But I remember when they first of all, it was a huge search around the country for where
Including New York.
HQ2,
Yeah, we were
including
supposed
New
to get
York,
it
was
in
a
Long Island City.
possibility.
Yeah.
There were union issues
Mhm.
that Amazon was concerned with there, and every community. This was a 4 years ago, before the pandemic. This was going to be a big boon to any community that got HQ2. And they actually, at the time, they thought about splitting it up between two different locations. Ended up
Mhm.
consolidating in Arlington, and house prices were expected to shoot through the roof for that period, for that area, whatever it was going to get um, HQ2. So I'm curious about how. I mean, it makes sense in terms of office space and what's going on, but I'm curious about how that's going to impact real estate in the area, and the whole cycle in terms of population. Drawing in. They were going to bring in like 20,000 people, um, so it has a huge impact on the neighborhood. This is today's
And
paper that
yeah,
you
now we're
got,
back to
right?
today's paper. But thank you,
Yeah.
Neil. That's actually helpful. I've been wanting to ask you that, and I thought it's best to ask in front of hundreds of people. Here is the Sunday paper, so we'll just be going right into it, and Neil will dip in and out as he sees stories that he wants to talk about, including, I know, our friend Dan Barry's
Definitely.
amazing story about the Hotel Pennsylvania, which some of you know. It was denied a landmark status, which is something that helps keep buildings going in New York and is being torn down. And so he does he looks back at that hotel. So we'll talk about that. But let's just see what else is in the paper today. There's the front page. The New York Times Magazine is inside the Louisville Police Department, where officers are reckoning with what it means to be a cop in a city that doesn't trust them. When art imitates art is the Arts and Leisure cover. Book review: The Rogue and the Noir. Walter Mosley's new novel, Every Man a King, is a hard boiled tale of billionaires, white nationalists, and a detective with a complicated past. And the real estate section is cover is excuse after excuse. Black and Latino developers struggle to expand. And Dasha Zukova's ambitions, the ex-wife of an oligarch, her art world rise, and the complications of Putin's war. And we rarely get a chance to look at the Times magazine, the Times Style magazine, men's fashion, just a singular kind of guide, the self-motivation of Willem Dafoe. And here is the Sunday business section. What's your workplace personality? In a world of remote jobs, some employers are finding personality tests more useful than ever. And then here finally the Sunday opinion cover is we've been talking about the lab leak hypothesis all wrong. And that's something that we'll want to hear about and read about. So lots to get into. And today we're, as you know, we're concentrating on the paper itself. So jump in, folks. Tell us what you're seeing in the paper. If you have any questions, let us know. We did want to mention that this show is a production of Digimentors, the company that Andrew Lee and I co-founded, and which Neil is VP of Events and Comms, and Salmia is our intern. Salmia Grover, thank you so much for being part of what we do. And our company does digital marketing, events and digital programs, communication strategy, strategic communications, training and workshops, staffing and recruiting. Looking to hire a social media manager? We know a lot of good ones, so get in touch with us. So we'd love to help you out if we can. And you can email us, neil@digimentors.group and Sree@digimentors.group. Yes, .group is an unusual URL, and there's Salmia, who is producing with us, and she's a Fordham University student.
We also want to give a shout out to Muckrack, our longtime sponsor of the New York Times Read Along. and they've partnered with Sree on a number of different projects. So thank you to Muckrack for all of your support of this show over the years. Sree, let's. So you're taking a look at the front page,
Yep. And so this
right?
picture here is aboard a helicopter from Ukraine's 18th Sikorsky Brigade during a mission over the Eastern Plains. The brigade's Soviet-era aircraft are holding up after a year of war. Above Ukraine's front lines, whirring relics battle on. And it's so hard to imagine, Neil, that it's been a year of this war. It's really something. Speaking of wars, a different kind of war, the war over abortion. Rose Fall turns North Carolina into destination. 37% rise in abortions. Out of state influx taxes clinics and energizes both sides of the fight. And I can imagine that this will soon come under the close scrutiny of the North Carolina legislators and it'll be an issue. In the Woods, a flashpoint over policing, and this is a story of Atlanta police encounter. And for
Yeah.
those of you who haven't watched this before, I read the paper cold with all of you, just like I would be browsing on a Sunday morning. And so I don't really know much of the story, much about the stories, unless they've been online and circulated during the previous part of the week. And Neil, you know that a lot of stories do get printed after having been online, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, and a couple of times weeks after they
And
were
months.
online.
And months in some cases. That story on the left that you were showing from Atlanta, I actually saw that online. That's part of the concern about the police and kind of protests against the police, but they're moving the protests effectively to these training grounds for like SWAT teams and fire in outside of Atlanta, literally in the woods. That's where they're taking the fight to the police effectively to protest
But the
police
police are
brutality.
forcing them there because it's less dangerous, or
No, I
they're
think that
mean.
I think it's. I mean, my quick read of it was that that's where the protesters, if you will, are choosing to engage
Oh, okay. I thought they were being
engage.
given permission to protest or something over there.
No,
Okay, good,
it's
good, good.
it's kind of like if you remember back in the '80s where there were concerns that we were training death squads in Latin America in at
Mm-hmm.
various like facilities in the U.S. It's kind of protesting their training grounds,
Okay,
protesting wherever
got
they're
it,
at.
got it. No,
Um, an
that's an
interesting move.
and yeah, and a good way to get attention. So I'm glad that's happening. Salmia is linking to the story, and that's what she's doing. So if you're on Facebook, on my Facebook account, you will see her posting links, and that way you can pick up these links whenever you want and to read them. And Twyla is pointing out the protesters are going to the site, and Twyla, a good friend, lives on the Upper West Side, is someone who keeps track of the protests and is a great activist and a great friend of the show. So thank you, Twyla.
One other comment,
And
Sri, before you continue. Sorry, when we were talking about Digimentors, I have to pull up Sujana's comment in terms of strong recommendation for Digimentors for your next event. Thank you, Sujana. Appreciate that so much. You've been
and
such a
Doc-
great support.
and Dr. Chandrasekhar and her high school friend Marina Kurian uh, created a show with us called She's on Call, and we had so much fun doing that show. It's on hiatus now, but we'd love to bring it back. And all of you who have events, we do hybrid events now. We do programs and shows. We'd love to talk to you about ways we might work together. And now we turn to a Trump story. Trump prepares for long fight as rivals loom. And there was something interesting about where some of the rivals went this past week, whether they went to the conservative uh, gathering or they went to the Club for Growth, calling Arizona inside the panic that roiled Fox. And this was a very important story because on election night, Fox was the first to call Arizona for Biden, and that set off a domino effect that made it more plausible for others to call it as well and gave that momentum to Biden. Of course, he did win, he had the votes, but in conservative circles, the conspiracy theory is that Fox called it wrong, and you saw the effect of that, including Carrie Lake's terrible run there this year in the elections. Cinema operators are experimenting with pricing tickets based on show times and seat locations. Suspense at the movies, what a seat will cost. I still remember being in New York when ticket prices hit $10 a seat, and there was a lot of consternation. This was in the 90s. Now, depending on where you go, it can be $20 a ticket. And what's interesting, Neil, about that, of course, is that just 2 years ago, we didn't know if theaters would survive. So the fact that they can do this, and they're trying to milk as much money, of course, as they can from the people who do go. Have you been in a theater yet with your daughter?
Oh yeah, no, we've gone to a few movies. We still wear masks when we go indoors. So we have seen a few movies and wearing masks the whole time. I'll say that as far as if you go back to the theater article, Sri, I'm wondering whether they'll also approach it like airline tickets, where
Mm.
the price can go up and down based on when you buy the ticket. Sometimes, if you buy it too early, it could be a high fare. It may dip down, several weeks before the flight. But then, if you try and get it last minute, I mean, imagine if you're trying to make last minute plans. And that's often what happens with Pam and I. We get an unexpected date night if family's doing a sleepover, and let's get a ticket. We can't find reservations. We can't find a good movie. That won't be good.
No, that won't. And of course, theaters did suffer. And while you may not have any sympathy for theater owners, it's the staff, or the people who
Staff,
work there, and projectionists, and all of those people didn't deserve what happened to them as it happened to
absolutely.
so many people.
Sujana,
Headline from history. Look at
sorry,
this.
Sujana says Pathan at Times Square Theater was awesome, even in
He,
masks.
yeah, so Pathan is the new Shah Rukh Khan film. If you think Tom Cruise looks good at 57 or whatever age he is, you should see Shah Rukh Khan with his six-pack abs in this movie. It's the most successful Bollywood film in North American history, and in its opening week made more than the latest Brad Pitt film. Our friend
Wow.
Gitesh Pandya was telling us from boxofficeguru.com. Here's a headline from history. New chronology of geologic time is fixed. March 5th, 1960, an international group of geologists meeting in New York issued a new timeline of Earth's history, doubling the estimated time of some past periods of geological evolution and halving others. And so this was a big deal when you're trying to measure 4.6 billion year history of the world. And last week's top trending headlines: Murdoch acknowledges Fox News hosts endorsed election fraud falsehoods, and that's part of the story on the front page. An epic battle of tanks, Russia was routed, repeating earlier mistakes. And this is also part of the front page story about helicopters and that Soviet era warfare. Canadians fume as migrants surge at their border. And so 40,000 crossed unlawfully into Canada. So they're coming from America, right, Neil? That's
Yeah,
got to be the only way.
yeah.
And so who are these? So these are people who've made it, these are migrants who've made it to America and then go all the way north and then cross again into Canada.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's an amazing story. The best looks from the Screen Actors Guild Awards. This is award season. And Neil, one of the things that we see how much America has changed and the world has changed is that there are two movies from India about animals that have been nominated for Oscar documentary awards in two different categories. One's called All That Breeds, which is on HBO Max, and on Netflix there's a show called The Elephant Whisperers. So the fact that there are two movies from India in the Oscars is lots of fun, and you should watch them. They're great. Here's a quote of the day. They want to say it's one man's fault, but it's a government of murderers. This is a quote from a protester in Greece. Says the government holds as much responsibility for a deadly train crash as the station manager who's facing manslaughter charges.
Can you check?
And the
Yeah, check the inside the Times article, Sri. What are they focusing on today?
Intrigued by zombies in search of self-editing, the chief TV critic at the Times sees a different vision of community in The Last of Us. This is a show I've not seen yet, but everyone's talking about it on HBO Max. I have not seen it. I don't know if you have seen it,
I
Neil.
I watched 1 or 2 episodes. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't get into it. Um, I think some of those shows you either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
Um,
And everyone who's watching right now, tell us what you think of The Last of Us if you've had a chance to see it or if it's on your list to watch. Here's another artifact from the archive of the Times. It's called In Times Past, Patrolling the Times. And this is from Mr. Dunlap, the curator of the museum at the Times, a collection of artifacts and historical documents. And we've talked about getting to get a tour of the Museum of the Times and doing a read along there. So that'll be exciting. And 5 smart security devices for your home. Neil, let me know if you have any of these. A smart smoke alarm, which we have. Smart doorbell camera, no. Home security system, no. Outdoor Wi-Fi camera, smart door lock. Maybe actually don't tell us, Neil, since you live in a. We don't want to know how
we
unprotected you might be. So
no
don't
no
say anything.
we do have a an alarm. We do have a alarm system and a
Okay.
camera
Okay.
aimed toward the front door.
Okay.
So don't try sneaking in,
Yeah,
anybody.
or maybe tell everybody you have everything. Yeah, and the dog, vicious dog, in the backyard.
We have
And
other
here,
stuff. They're just not smart in
yeah,
terms of the
exactly.
smoke alarms.
And
Um,
here is a couple's risque post test Singapore's limits when it comes to sex. We
hmm,
didn't do it. We didn't do what we did at the expense of anyone. Our point is what they've done to us. Do we deserve this? So they've been fined $17,000 by a court in Singapore after they shared erotic messages in a private group chat.
wow.
And supporters of the couple have questioned why sexual activity between consenting adults is still a crime in Singapore. And that's the story there. And then this is an ad. We're still in that movie season, the award season. And this is Kate Blanchett in Tar. I think that's how it's pronounced. And a lot of praise. Look at this. Blanchett proves she is our greatest living actor. And we go in here. In West Bank, new armed guards emerge and long dominant warns stir. And spurred into action as Palestinian leaders' popularity plummets. Provincial governor shot dead in an attack in the Philippines. Oh, look at this. UCSF, the University of California at San Francisco, is using its initials as Until Cancer Surrenders for Good. EU diplomat seeks a new beginning in the UK. A Northern Ireland deal opens a path to greater cooperation. After COVID missteps, China lays out vision for revived economy. Also, we saw a huge increase in defense expenditure. And this is the story about the Greek government and about it getting blamed for the deadly train crash. 2 trains were on the same track going at each other, and when all those people died. And a mass shooting in Thailand tore through generations. Look at this, young people. And of course, Neil, this is what happens with the news, right? This is the first time I'm seeing this.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's been in the news, but compare this to how we covered Sandy Hook and the attention we paid to it. It's
What
so tragic.
what I was going to say, Sri, this is a good example. We talk about serendipity when we look at the print edition of the Sunday Times. This hadn't come across my feed anywhere. I hadn't seen any tweets or Facebook posts. But when you're flipping through the paper, you see articles like this, and it's the photographs. If you look at the photographs of the kids and the little the short bios of them, I mean, this is those ages, age 3 and 4, just incredible too. But what I would say is that there are 2 things. One, we don't see these kinds of mass shootings as frequently in other countries. I mean, it's a uniquely American phenomenon. Almost weekly, you have multiple mass casualty events. But I actually was glad to see that the Times covered this mass shooting in Thailand in the way they would have covered a shooting here in the States. This kind of almost a full page, lots of photographs, really get people's attention. I was actually impressed by that.
Yeah, very impressive that they did this. I'm glad they did. Gene study spotlights Chernobyl stray dogs exploring fallout of radiation exposure. The first deep dive into the distinct DNA of canine survivors of Chernobyl.
Uh,
And I'm just going to make a plug for the HBO show about Chernobyl that ran a couple of years ago. really worth your time if you're interested in history. And it's not a documentary; it's a kind of a feature about. It's a series, well, mini series about it, and with
On the
actors.
Chernobyl story, Sri, I'll point out the headline online is in Chernobyl's stray dogs, geneticists find nuclear families.
Hmm.
Someone had fun with that.
Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, definitely clever. Above the trenches, whirring relics battle on. This is in Ukraine, and here's fight for Bakhmut turns into a war for vital roads, and battling inch by inch to control supply routes as the Russians close in. U.S. accuses two men of selling aviation equipment to Russia. Two men from Kansas have been accused of this.
So hopefully we've converted Devyani into a loyal viewer. Hopefully she'll come back. Extremely interesting show, Sri and Neil, and very informative. Great initiative, guys. So as we mentioned, we've actually been doing this for several years. We haven't taken the deep dive into the paper in a long time, but thank you for showing your appreciation, Devyani.
And everyone, we have this great archive. Of course, the news will have moved on, but the guests are fantastic. Some of the most interesting journalists and experts in various topics in the world. Just go to digimentors.group and you'll find the New York Times read along, and you can look at our archives. About 2, 3 years worth of archives are there. This is an interesting story that our friend Katie Rosman, who was on our show, one of the first times we went to somebody's house to do a interview on the read along. She's written about a guy who took off his shoes 20 years ago and he hasn't put them back on. And as you can imagine, at some restaurants, at offices and other places, people cringe, and some places gets kicked off because in America it's not uncommon to see a sign that says "No shoes, no service." And so this guy is testing the limits of no shoes, no service, and here he is walking around without shoes. And some folks have criticized the coverage of this because there are parts of America, including on native reservations, where there are kids who don't have shoes or can't afford them. And so why are we covering this? And this is, I think this is a genuinely interesting story, but there's no reason you can't cover that as well. And Brett Chapman, who writes a lot about media coverage of Native American folks, was one of the critics of the piece.
Sri, before you move on, I'm going to bring up Katie's Facebook post on the story. She actually said, and this is a little small to see, so I'll make it a little bigger for folks. But she said that the quote, navigating the train is easy, navigating people is tricky, according to Mr. DeRuvo. And how would you react to a guy who walked barefoot into a restaurant? The story will challenge your perception of your own tolerance. He certainly challenged mine. Thought that was interesting.
Electric car conversion. So electric car ownership more than doubles in the New York metro region. So that's progress. Owners seek to save on gas and makers roll out more models. And here's Damali Alexander of Yonkers with her Tesla. She used a ride to help persuade her cousin to buy a battery powered car. So she and her cousin bought that. And we're keep rolling here. Ohio Island loves ice fishing, but something's missing now. And for those of you who associate ice fishing with the Nordic countries, it's big in parts of the U.S., especially where we have Nordic weather, including in Minnesota and places like that. So this is in Ohio. Why we're here, we're exploring how America defines itself one place at a time. For residents of this northern Ohio island, the winter season is usually where the real fun begins. It's in Put-in Bay, not Putin Bay, but Put-in Bay, Ohio. Naomi says, your show is just as educational and entertaining than using the actual paper. That's very kind and appreciate it, Naomi. And here are people having fun. But I guess it's not as cold, maybe. Is that the story? I haven't read it yet, but it says something's missing now. So obviously,
I don't know.
yeah,
But
it's got to be a
before
climate change story.
before you turn the page, if you can zoom out just a little bit, I just think that the photographs are really impressive, and such a huge photo on that left,
Yeah.
going what, 5 columns across,
Yes.
5, 6, 7, 8 columns.
Hmm.
Really great story.
Whiskey fungus coats a Tennessee town. So those of you who drink Tennessee bourbon, this might be something that will worry you. Jack Daniels, it's whiskey fungus on tree branches in Lincoln County, Tennessee. Lincoln County, Tennessee. Residents have been complaining about the ethanol-fueled fungus from a Jack Daniels distillery in neighboring Moore County. It turns even after pressure washing, they say. So this is not something that affects whiskey. This is whiskey polluting or affecting its environment. That's interesting. And here is suspense at the movies. What a seat will cost. Woman at center of sensational 1990 murder case now seeks mercy. This is what she looked like in 1990, and that's her. Pamela Smart, above in 1991, on the first fully televised trials and became fodder for movies. It's death by incarceration, she said of her sentence. New ways to fix heart's forgotten valve. A leaking tricuspid valve eventually leads to heart failure, and statin substitute cuts heart attack risk. A drug has a modest effect on cardiac illness, study finds. So I'm on a statin, so I'll need to go back and read this. Amid Trump inquiry, GOP seeks oversight of Georgia prosecutors. And here, there's more Trump stuff. By the way, just speaking of health, Neil, you remember just before the pandemic and the lockdown in early March 2020, we had on our show a doctor talking about colorectal cancer awareness. And
Yes.
that was a very important episode. People can go back and watch that. He recommended everyone have colonoscopies, and I just had mine and talked about it. And I recommend everybody who doctor recommends, anybody above the age of 45 should be screened. And please do get screened if you can. And we're thinking of our friend Tim McDonald.
Exactly. Dr. Akash Agarwal was our guest right before the pandemic hit, and we talked about colorectal cancer.
And he came to
Very,
my house and apartment
yeah,
and sat down. This was within 10 days. Nobody was allowed to go anywhere. Wrong on New York's murder rate, on Afghanistan, on Will Milnes and more. So they're fact checking Trump's speech at CPAC. And so we're back to having to do this. And I shudder at that. The Conways, one a loyal Trump loyalist and one a critic, are planning to divorce. This is one of those couples that didn't make any sense in recent years because he was Trump's biggest critic, and now they're getting a divorce. They survived the Trump years, but obviously didn't survive after that.
Sree, I just want to point out one thing with that article, if you don't mind. I'm going to show what I have in terms of the paper real quick, and I'll stop my camera. Um, I always point out that in New York they can print like 40 pages in that front section, right? In DC and others, they can only print 24. So when you look at the front page, that Conway story is right. It's almost like a separate section, and it leads you to it. I wouldn't have seen that story. I may not have flipped through all the way to get to that paper, but outside New York, it got a little more prominence.
Because it's on that second front almost, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Williamson announces bid for 2024 presidency, pushing Biden to declare. Marianne Williamson, the first Democratic challenger. I'd also missed this news. She's a new age guru of some kind. Storms and tornadoes sweep the South, killing at least 12 and knocking out power. Wayne Camadoy is watching. Alluring headline for Putin Bay. Print headline writing is a real craft. What's missing? Ice. Print design by Anna Heisey. And thank you, Wayne, for being such a great supporter of the show. He's one of the great designers at the Times, and he's been on our show as well as supported us by sending us PDFs and other things in advance. So if you want inside baseball about the New York Times, he's a person to know and follow online. Trump seeks to block Pence from testifying, of course. And this was a sad story. Tom Sizemore, intense actor
Yeah.
with a troubled life, is dead at 61. He had a brain aneurysm. I'd never seen him before Saving Private Ryan, but he was also in Heat, which was a big movie. He could be chilling and charismatic, playing a soldier, thug, cop, or killer. and here he is in robbery homicide division, and a very intense guy. Justin O. Schmidt, 75, an entomologist who was known as the king of sting. I guess he got bitten by a lot of uh, insects. His pain scale was mentioned in Ant-Man and cited in a clue on Jeopardy. Justin O. Schmidt was a tarantula with a tarantula hawk wasp. Look at that, three animal names in one animal. He ranked its sting 4 on the pain scale, the most severe: blinding, fierce, shockingly electric. So we hope we never meet a tarantula hawk wasp. And Raphael Vignoli, architect who built landmarks across globe, dies at 78. Unusual, Neil, to see 3 white men. They've
Yeah.
been doing much better effort at more diversity.
N-
Of course, you can only cover the people who actually die. So
n- Nothing on the next
he's
page.
yeah, and he's responsible. Maybe on the next page there is, but look at this. Look at this. He's responsible for this. What I consider a monstrosity. This is that building.
You hate that building.
I hate that building. I can't see it from here, but it has blow through floors, meaning you may not be able to see here, but every 10, 15
The
floors,
wind.
to keep the building from toppling over, there's
Yeah.
an entire floor with no windows and only the core of the elevator shaft. So why
Wow.
build a building like that? And this is now, because of where it is, right past Central Park on Central Park South. It can be seen from various vantage points across the New York City metro area,
Yeah.
more prominent than the Chrysler, Empire, World Trade Center, etc. So I do not like that building,
Y-
but still, he must have done lots of other good work to have earned the right to build that.
Sree, you don't. I meant to ask you earlier. You don't have a view from where you're sitting out the window, do you? Are you able to show us?
I can show you. This is
There we
the
go.
view. This is the view of. Some of you don't know that who've been watching for years. We lived on the Upper West Side for almost 30 years, and then we moved recently to next to the UN. So that's the United Nations headquarters there. There's the East River. We used to always show you views of the Hudson River. And unfortunately, there's a Trump building in our view, which is that black one there. And that's the view. And in the distance, you can see that's the 57th Street Bridge, known as for years as the Queensboro Bridge, and now known as the Ed Koch Bridge, named after a famous New York City mayor. On last point, this is Roosevelt Island here, named after the president. And then there's a memorial there at the tip of it called Four Freedoms Park. And so you can visit that when you're next in New York.
Absolutely.
All, all right. Sports section. Neil and I are both big sports fans, and Neil's a big baseball fan. Coaches log overtime as baseball goes on the clock. There have been several new changes to try to speed up the game of baseball, which can easily take 3.5, 4 hours. And immediately, there's been in the exhibition season known as spring training and the exhibition time already, the clock has cut back to 2.5 hours. So that's a success already, but there'll obviously be lots of pain as changes come on the pitch clock.
I'll tell you. I just want to make one comment about that, Sree. First of all, I'm running my Go Yankees sticker at the bottom whenever we do talk about baseball. Not that often, but as far as the changes are concerned, I'm not keen on the pitch clock. But the big thing in terms of the shift, um, I think they're really it's unfortunate. They're micromanaging the game. I think they're micromanaging the game.
All right, so this is where we're going to disagree because I think it's good to shorten it because young kids and others don't have the 3.5 hours that it takes. And also, there's now going to be more action because one of the things they did was they made the
The
actual base
bases,
bigger.
yeah,
And because of these pitching changes, the pitchers are more distracted, so people can try to steal bases more. So all of that will put the ball into play more often. They've also dealt with something called a shift for non-baseball fans that was affecting the way that people were defending against the batters. So we'll see, Neil, how it all turns out. But as with change, you're like me, I think, in a lot of things where we say, I'm all for progress. It's change I cannot stand. And this will become reality. Just like I know people are upset in Chicago, are upset when the Cubs went to night baseball. They never had lights in Wrigley Field. And then they had it. And now people in Chicago love being able to go to a game at night in it and having the choice to see the Cubs then. So change in everything is difficult, I think, would be fair to say.
Sure.
When teams struggled, sometimes the system is to blame. There's this big soccer story, and Djokovic is now world's top player, still unvaccinated, seeks an exemption so he can play in Indian Wells. He's one of those people who generates a lot of online love and hate because of his attitude about various things. In case anybody thinks we're in a recession, the private jet membership with the luxury of no limits. All right, we really did deep dive as we promised into that section there, the front page. Folks, if you're just watching, I'm Sree Sreenivasan along with Neil Parekh. We're reading the Sunday New York Times as we do every Sunday morning. And we talk about the paper. We read your comments on the air. Please tell us where you're watching from, what stories you're interested in, any of your takes, and tag a friend. They can join us live or later. They can watch us. And Naomi says, remember New York Newsday? It was valiant. It failed 10-year effort to compete with other New York tabloids. That's right. And it was killed by a guy who, I'm forgetting his name, Mark something. Some people watching will know he shut down the paper when he became the head of the chain that owned New York Newsday. And he came from the world of breakfast cereal, so he was called a serial killer because he knew nothing about journalism, and he came and killed the paper, killed New York Newsday. Newsday is a big Long Island paper, and now it had, as you heard from Naomi, had that paper in New York City. Doug Levy says, my father walked to the newsstand every morning to get the paper. We didn't have home delivery until we moved to Los Angeles. That's so interesting and he got a walk in there too, Doug. That's nice. So before we go here to the New York Times Magazine, I do want to tell folks that Neil is going to be going next weekend to Austin, Texas for the big South by Southwest conference. And for the first time ever, there's going to be a South Asian house. And you can check out southasianhouse.com with lots of South Asian celebrities and others. And Neil's going to make his way there. So we will not have a show Sunday morning unless he recruits someone to suddenly do an impromptu show. But that's going to be a lot of fun. And that's in this coming weekend, so next Sunday.
Yeah.
And keep posting your comments, folks. And I hope Neil gets to eat some Rudy's barbecue, which is the best that I've eaten in Texas and maybe anywhere.
I was going to point out Patricia's a question. So we start with the front page, the A-book usually, but then she asked, do you have a go-to first section, or do you just go front to back? Sree, you had the magazine up. Is that your first?
Yeah, I love because you get the magazine on Saturday. So I usually before the read along, I used to read half the paper on Saturday and half on Sunday, and I used to read it sort of the way we're reading it. But now with the paper, I don't read anything on Saturday except the Saturday sections, so that it'll be fresh for all of you on Sunday when I read it. So I'm surprised and confused as anybody is when you're reading something like this. So that's how I read this paper. When I used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal print edition, I used to start by reading deliberately the opinion section, which would get me angry and upset. So it'd be a great way to start the day. The very first thing, even before the New York Times, I'd open the weekday Wall Street Journal and go to the back page and read that for sure first. Okay, look at this. I've not heard of the American Mosaic Journalism Prize by the Heisig Simmons Foundation, and the recipients are Cerise Castle and Carvel Wallace, awarded for excellence in long-form narrative or deep reporting on stories about underrepresented and or misrepresented groups in the United States. The American Mosaic Journalism Prize. That's pretty cool. You can find out more at hsfoundation.org/prize.
want to give a shout out to Ron Thomas, who is watching from Dubai, saying welcome back. Chris Gorman is watching from New York City.
Yeah.
And then Sree, maybe another friend of yours, Lakshmi Kumaran.
Hi, Lakshmi. Thank you for watching. And thanks, Chris. And thanks, Ron, for watching. Chris is, and Lakshmi is watching from Trivandrum, Kerala. That's my mom's hometown. My dad
Yeah.
lives there. And so very nice to have you. I was just going to say, Chris, we need to do a read along at your museum. He's at the American Folk Art Museum, which is a wonderful museum that everyone who visits New York should make an effort to go to. And Chris, let's talk offline about doing a read along there with you or your director. It'll be lots of fun. All right. Do you play any of the New York Times games, Neil?
I used to play Wordle religiously, and then I stopped. I played the bee maybe a year or two ago, but not much.
The bee I played sometimes. I haven't played in a while, but I saw there's some kind of trademark conflict over the name Wordle that the New York Times is being sued over.
Oh, really? I missed that.
Yeah. Post office, tech and finance workers posted countless videos about the luxuries of their jobs. Then the mood shifted. So, post office, about posting from your office. And that's, of course, when the tech industry lost so many jobs. 50% of their workforce literally does nothing every day, a typically dismissive comment on a clip from a Meta product manager. All right, so for the first time, I think in 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 3 years, we're gonna actually read a poem here cold.
You don't want to leave it to the end, Sree?
Oh, you want to come back? Okay, we can come back.
Let's do it at the end.
Yeah, so we'll come back to this. We'll read this poem by Daniel Borzatsky. We'll read it live. See, I don't even know how to pronounce it. My theory is that everybody who reads a poem out loud should be a scholar of the poem or the poet, him or herself. But I butcher this, and I should do this every Sunday. Now we're going to come back to it. Here's Woody Harrelson in an interview, is still going through his trip with fame. But even without fame, to deal with one's ego is a powerful tussle. I'm trying to remember what I saw him on. He was on SNL. And he said some things about the lockdown that Elon Musk and other right-wing haters loved. And so there was a whole thing about that. But Woody Harrelson, we've watched, many of us, from his days in the show Cheers, and watching him kind of grow up in front of our eyes. All right, how about this? A serious topic by Kwame Anthony Appiah and the Ethicist. My friend is dating sorry?
I was saying, let's dig in. We haven't been able to do the Ethicist in a while.
Yeah, my friend is dating a murderer. Should I do anything about it? Oh, goodness. So, Neil, I'll read the question. You can give me an answer without you're also coming into this cold. I have a childhood friend who recently moved into my home. Oh, into my home. Everything has been going well, except she's dating an inmate who was convicted of murdering one of his family members. This inmate is somebody we knew when we were younger. Our friend group was very affected by the murder. I have my own personal trauma with the inmate, and I know my roommate does as well. He's really not a great guy, but my roommate is convinced the inmate has changed. She tells me details about their relationship, as friends do. It's clear to me he hasn't changed much. I avoid talking about him as much as possible and change the subject when he's brought up. Although he still has 11 years left on his sentence, he's trying to appeal for a lesser term. I'm hopeful their relationship will end before he's released. Otherwise, I fear for her safety. I can see the red flags everywhere. What do I do to help? My family tells me if I try to talk to her about it, it will push her away. But I have a hard time just standing by. Oh my God. This is some letter, because I thought this was like in Friend Dating a Murderer somewhere else. This is her room. It's my roommate is dating a murderer.
Yeah.
Should I do anything about it? Wow, Neil. So over to you before we read the professor's answer.
Absolutely. So I'll say the first thing, usually I'll say 99 times out of 100, I've always tried to be supportive of friends and their relationships, even if I wasn't, didn't get along with their partner. If my friend really felt strongly, I would support them and be there as a friend. In this case, I draw the line. Not only does that person have to step in, but there's a personal impact as well. I mean, I don't even think it would be different if, if the host, if the person who was writing didn't know the uh the person who's incarcerated, didn't know the victim, wasn't part of that original friend circle. But the fact that it's part of their friend circle, part of their history, their shared history, something they're traumatized by, um I would have to draw the line. I would have to say, if this isn't good for you, you have to end this relationship, or they have to kick them out. I can't have that person living in my space if they're in this kind of relationship.
And this person who wrote the letter has trauma from the same murderer.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
that is crazy. Okay, here's what Kwame Anthony Appiah says: a relationship that takes place while one party is in prison doesn't tell you very much what things will be like when the partner has been released. Physical violence that can't occur when two people are meeting only under supervision. An incarcerated partner has a strong incentive to behave well in order to maintain a relationship. That may be one of the few positive elements in his life. Nor can I judge whether this man would pose a danger to your friend once he's been released. You haven't said anything about what you think the red flags are. Come on, Professor, those are the red flags. Beyond your opinion, not shared by your roommate, who surely knows him better than you do, that he's not changed much. Still, to go by the available research, men are much less likely to commit violent crimes in middle age than they are in youth. In fact, a study of recidivism rates for people paroled from life sentences in California found only 0.6% of parolees were later convicted of felonies, none of them for murder. Absent specific information, I would say the risk here may be less substantial than you fear, and this inmate won't be released early if a parole board thinks he poses a significant danger. So separate issue is how you and your roommate would feel if your roommate asked you to accept the presence of someone who caused all of you enormous distress, even if it was many years ago. It would take a special effort on your part to reconcile with him, and it may be a lot for your roommate to ask. And yet forgiveness, even if partial and provisional, is a worthwhile aim. So he's aiming at a higher standard there, Neil, than you are. I'm
Wow.
more on your side than the professors.
He's also focusing more on what happens after this person is released, and whether or not they, pose a danger, to any of the individuals, in terms of talking about recidivism, etc. I'm focused more on the here and now. That person is in a current relationship. I don't want that dynamic in my space, in my life. That's something that, it's, again, it may be a little bit different if I didn't know the person, if I wasn't traumatized by the original act. But the fact that it's going to bring up things for me and for me personally, is too far.
Yeah, I agree. There are great questions here too, folks. So check out The Ethicist every
Twyla
Sunday.
weighed in dangerous advice from the professor. So I think
Yeah. Thank
she
you,
might be on
Twyla.
our side.
Yeah. Letter of recommendations, epitaphs. Most days it's difficult for me to consider my course through life, but walking in a cemetery, I'm humbled to read the incomplete markers left for those who already made the trip. So he recommends reading epitaphs in cemeteries. That's an interesting thing. Read like the wind.
Sree, want to remind people that the gift link for the Ethicist column is on our website, in case you want to take a closer look and share it with anyone.
So
We have,
we should tell people that the gift link is what allows you to read the story beyond the paywall in the New York
correct.
Times, and we're putting a bunch of them on the website. In fact, Neil, why don't we take a second here just to show the main website and where people can find the read along.
Absolutely. Give me one
So
moment
while
to
he's
bring
doing
up.
that, I'm just going to go over here and show you Read Like the Wind, The Secret Life of the Lonely Doll, The Search for Dare Write. So read if you like. This is, I guess this feature is how, like, summaries of books.
Absolutely.
And here is a recipe from the Amalfi Coast. The briny umami of pasta with colature di alici comes straight from the Amalfi Coast. A note thrillingly close to rot of dank earth and the deepest sea. Okay, that's not something on a Sunday morning I feel like I have to eat. A note thrillingly close to rot of dank earth and the deepest sea. All right, so this is the front page of the site.
Right. And if you go here, you can click on blog insights at the top, and you'll see all of our blog posts. You'll see the New York Times read along, It's a category here. So if you want to look for an old episode, you can click on that link, and it'll just show you the old read along episodes. But if you click through to the show with Sree, I'm going to scroll by because we have the video playing at the top. You'll see gift links. Where to get to the Hotel Pennsylvania story that's in the Metro section. But we have a gift link to that article, a PDF, a note that Dan Barry reads that article. Sree, when we get there, I want to play just the
Yes,
first,
please. Yeah, I'm
opening.
excited about that. Yeah.
But then the additional features we added this week: a gift link to the Ethicist, a gift link to social cues, and a gift link to the poem, which we will get to at the end of the show.
And the video of the show is there as well. And one of the people you scrolled past when you were showing us the front page of the read along is our friend Kristen, who was here, Charbot, as the she's the associate editor of the cooking section.
Yes.
And we had so much fun with her, Kristen Chambrot's, talking about various aspects of the New York Times cooking app, and you can go back and read it. So,
and there was a special section, I'll make it a little bigger, that week when she was on. There was a special section, Soups On, and we have a gift link and a PDF of that entire section on our website. So check
please
it out.
Grab it. Yeah, go to digimentors.group and grab all those links, folks.
Yeah, and you can find it more easily if you want to. You can go to digimentors.group/NYT readalong, and that will take you straight there.
All right. We're back to the magazine, and nobody wants to be the world's villain. This is inside the Louisville Police Department, where the officers are reckoning with what it means to be a cop in a city that doesn't trust them. So this will be an important story. Hope you get a chance to read it. Look at these very interesting pictures. There's about the police, from the police officers' point of view, and various folks there. A cathedral of sound. Among the casualties of the historic fire at Notre Dame were the building's centuries-old acoustics. Now experts are modeling ways to revive them. If you care anything about American sports, you hear the name Notre Dame all the time, that when you see the real place in France, as opposed to the University of Notre Dame, you end up thinking that's the right pronunciation, but of course it's not. A hole where Notre Dame's spire used to be. And that's the photograph that you see here. And this is an audio, so this is something that you'll want to find online and listen to it when you get a chance. All the restoration work that's going on. The EVT revolution, a new method of treating stroke, is already saving thousands of lives a year. It could save millions, and getting there will mean transforming an entire system of care, by Eva Holland. So this is about a stent retriever used in, that's what EVT is, a procedure in which a clot is physically extracted with a long catheter from a stroke patient's brain, restoring blood flow. An EVT performed at Foothills Medical Center in Calgary, Alberta. Well, all progress like this is so good to read about. And the hard part, where they say you need to change the system of care. The American system of care is a mess, even though we have such great doctors, such great nurses, such great facilities. Overall, you see how bad it can be. Lots of ads here for luxury living, and more games in the back. And Will Short's puzzle, edited by Will Short's, but this is by Jonathan Clark Levin, a PhD student in Cambridge. Last week, Neil, the crossword was written by a professional puzzle maker. I didn't know there were that many professional puzzle makers. But with a partner, he once held a world record for the longest continuous handshake, 15 plus hours. That's even longer than it took him to make this puzzle. I'm surprised there's a longest handshake, and teenage me or preteen me might have wanted to break that record, because it sounds plausible, right? It's 15 hours. It's not 1,500 hours or something, 150 hours. And doesn't take a lot of skill. So there must be some very specific parameters of the 15-hour.
Think about how many pumps you get in a 15-hour handshake.
Yeah, that's right. Your arm may fall off. Your arm may fall off. Here's a clue that I can answer right away. It says number 56 across is Meet the Press host Chuck. So that's, of course, Chuck Todd, on the show.
I
And
was gonna share, Sree, that we had Greg Pliska on several back in
yes,
January. He helped with Puzzle Mania, which came out at the end of the year. He's a puzzle maker and a composer. You can find his show on our archives as well.
nice. Everybody go get that. And of course, the 1619 project. We were on this early as soon as it came out. Neil recognized the importance of the 1619 project and where it was going to lead. He couldn't have predicted all the ways it would change the conversation in America, but he certainly said we've got to discuss it that first week itself. It was really something. And
And I'm putting in the link to the show
yeah,
with Sunny Slaughter. You can find it at readalong.link 1619 project. This was the first time we met Sunny. Sunny was a guest last just a few weeks ago, talking about her current work. But when we did the 1619 project again, this was back in 2019. I went to her house and we did the show in person. Just a very different. I mean, we've had the chance to get so many great guests from around the country, even around the world. We had someone from Belgium, Alia Papageorgiou, a few months ago with this platform. But there is still something missing about having someone come to your place or going to someone's place and actually reading the paper together.
I totally agree. So the Sunday Opinion is about, we've been talking about the lab leak thesis all wrong by David Wallace Wells. So we'll come into that. We'll come to that in a minute. This is columns and commentary. 1776 is not just what DeSantis wants it to be. Nikki Haley's serene hypocrisy. The Power of Art in a Political Age by David Brooks. The other one was Pamela Paul. This debate hasn't made us safer. What would we do differently if we knew the COVID emerged from a lab? That's a great question. There is now more indication that it was from a lab leak, perhaps, than the wet market, but there's no indication it was terrorism or deliberate release. It was an accidental lab leak. But the question remains is, how would we treat it differently? The right is focusing on that, but just think about how badly we've handled the pandemic without whatever its origins. Why we're seeking so many attempts to link magic to science, the return of magicians. That's Ross Douthat. I wrote in my newsletter a few months ago about the white guy confidence of Ross Douthat, and I find he's wrong so many things, so many times on so many things. And folks, a plug for my newsletter. It's on Substack, sreenet.substack.com, sreenet.substack.com every Sunday. All right, Lydia Polgreen, Biblical Devastation, Political Tragedy. And this is about the earthquake last month in Syria and Turkey. And voters should pick the vice president. Biden has a succession issue. This would help solve it. So I wonder what that is. Greg Craig, unusual name, a lawyer who served in the White House under Bill Clinton and Obama. He's been twice worked for American presidents.
Sree, historians will remember that that's actually how vice presidents used to be picked. They were the second top vote getter in our first few elections. That's how Thomas Jefferson came to be vice president to John Adams.
Yep.
Rivals, but
Yeah.
maybe that's what they're suggesting. Maybe, I assume, within a primary system, not. Can you imagine the second leading vote getter in the top two in a two-party system? That'd be
Yeah,
crazy.
we would have had Vice President Trump.
Oh God,
that would be horrible. Yeah. I think the only thing that could be as troubling as a President Trump would be a Vice President Trump. Bruce McNugget, I love processed food, but I can no longer enjoy it. I know lots of people who eat a lot of this on a regular basis. Ron Thomas says the show is always a learning session. Thank you, Ron, watching from Dubai. Ron sat in my apartment in New York and read the paper with me. I can't wait to do that again, Ron, either in Dubai or in New York. Next time you're home, please stop by. the truth about the censorship of Roald Dahl. Most of the edits to make the writer's work less offensive are of very little importance. There's been some talk about this and some attention being paid to this. All right, we have about 20 minutes left, and we have a lot of things to get through, so we're going to try to speed it up a little bit. The editorial board says Florida is trying to take away the American right to speak freely. Thank you. And there's a megaphone with the Florida orange stuffed in there. And the back is migrants risk it all on the death train. And photographs and text by Oscar B. Castillo, a documentary photographer, multimedia artist, and educator. All right, we're building up to.
Great session as always. Sorry, Sree.
Yeah, that's Lakshmi. Thank you very much. We're building up, folks, to get to what I'm really excited about, the Metropolitan section, where we'll be talking about Dan Barry's article. So stay tuned for that. Sunday Business cover is about what's your workplace personality, and people are using workplace personality quizzes to try to find out. Neil at Digimentors, we've not done that yet. Trying to find out each other's personality. We may not want to. All right. Your boss's bathrobe is not office attire. I recently moved for a job that sounded like an incredible opportunity. It was a very good fit for my skill set, a startup with a brand new and shiny workspace. We're supposed to move into the space 3 months ago. There have been various delays, and we've been working from my boss's home. As more and more people come into the team, the limitations of the arrangement have become apparent. I found alternative workplaces. She's very particular about many things and can be beautiful. That can be beautiful. But when she doesn't understand something, she gets upset and will raise her voice and lament no one is doing anything. I have a lot of grace for my boss. She made a significant investment in the business. We're getting paid, but I can't be complicit in her bad behavior. Am I naive in thinking she'll change once we move into an actual space? So she also sometimes shows up in her bathrobe because it's her own house. So that's the letter to the editor. I mean, the letter to Roxanne Gay, your work friend, that column.
I'm glad you don't show up to our meetings in your bathrobe, sir.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. Whether pants are worn is another question. And that can be, thank God for Zoom. The heirs to Dilbert emerge on TikTok and Instagram. We know that Scott Adams has been not canceled, but held accountable for the terrible things he has said about Black people and calling for a separation between Black folks and white folks. And he's quoting a Rasmussen poll, which nobody should look at. It's a heavily Republican poll. They talked to a couple of hundred people. How many of them were actually Black folks, we don't know. And from that, he's extrapolating what tens of millions of Black folks think. Horrible,
it's
horrible
incredible.
person.
I want to sneak in. Rose Horowitz is watching from Connecticut. She was our guest last week on a special edition focusing on women to follow. Rose, congratulations on your incredible summit earlier last week. We're so thrilled that it went so well. Mary Curtis was sharing that it's interesting that 1619 Project has become a shorthand in the culture war debate, and how history about race is taught in schools. And also, it's ironic that this weekend is Selma's Bloody Sunday March. And we produced a show for the Southern Poverty Law Center on Friday, a wreath-laying ceremony at the Civil Rights Memorial Center in honor of Bloody Sunday.
And the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, is, for those of you not from America, you may not be as familiar with it, but it's the organization that helped kill the Klan and bring down so many of the Confederate statues. I'm very proud to work with the SPLC. Do check them out on splc.org. And that's the kind of work that we do at Digimentors, helping organizations do even better online. And here is the Sunday Times style magazine, which we never look at. And it's all about men's fashion, and neither Neil or I are known for our fashion sense. But the cover is just a singular kind of guy, the self-motivation of Willem Dafoe. I forget that he's not William Dafoe, he's Willem Dafoe.
Willem. I will say, Sree, in terms of style points, you certainly get more points than me. Durga has helped you out considerably choosing
yes.
Your pants and some of your more interesting shirts. I don't think I could ever rock the pink pants the way that
Yeah,
you
pink
can.
pants or something. Yes. She will not take any more credit for any of that now. But the reason she did that was she watched one of my TEDx talks as I was getting ready for a different, then different TEDx talk, and she said, you dressed so badly, Dad." And then she took me to Uniqlo and got me new clothes. All right. Dasha Kuzova's Ambitions, the Sunday Style section, the ex-wife of an oligarch, her art world rise and the complications of Putin's war, deeper layers of a life lived online. In her post and podcast, Eileen Kelly opens up about her mental health struggles. And, this medium, Neil, this being online is a great way for us to talk about things. And you want to tell us about the podcast that you've been working on?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sree. I'll share it, and I'll also bring it on screen. One of the things that we've been doing, and this has been a project supported by Digimentors, is a podcast called Unspoken Conversations with Candace. And what this is for folks who may not be familiar with it, I'll bring it up and show you some of the background. Candice Sanchez had a podcast for 2 years, and in for year three, she's focusing on male survivors of sexual abuse. I had met her. I shared my own story of being abused by a neighbor, and when she heard that, and she heard my call to action to encourage women to make space for men, she dedicated this entire season to sharing the stories of male survivors. And so I've been helping to produce that. Digimentors is supporting it pro bono. I wrote a blog post about my own experience. We've had 2 episodes so far. And it's just been an incredible experience. And again, I want to thank Sree and Digimentors for your support of this effort. I think it is making a difference for folks, and it is helping to give voice to something that people don't talk about very often.
And thank you, Neil. Men don't talk about this enough, and certainly men from our community, the Indian community, South Asians, very reluctant to talk about any kind of trauma. And thank you. You shared your story first live on Facebook.
Yeah, on the read along.
And on the read along, and we were all very moved and sad for young Neil and everything that he went through, and it's shaped. You've not moved on, but you've been able to overcome as much as possible and be the successful man you are. So everyone, check this out. Tell folks how they can find this.
If you go to my website, neilparekh.org/unspoken, you can find my post about this, both links to the website, the podcast, and my own blog post. I shared my story in a blog post. Uh, this is the headline for it. It's a journey of discovery and healing. And I also wrote a post more recently that showed, was effectively a thank you. Um, if you thank you for the encouragement and support. My 7-year-old self and my 49-year-old self both say thank you. The response I had to the blog post, Sree, was incredible.
As you should, yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
No, thank you. And thank you for sharing that with us. And everyone, look for Candace's podcast and check out the entire season of Unspoken. All right. We're now going to go to the social cues. We have about 10 minutes left, and we have a lot to cover. The social cues column by Philip Galland's Deadbeat Grandson. My grandson has been married 3 times and has 2 children, a baby boy and his 3rd wife, and an 8-year-old daughter from his first marriage. He refuses to have any contact with his daughter or pay any child support to his first wife. I am hurt and angry by his abandonment of his child. I have not seen his new baby yet, nor do I want to. This marriage may fail too, and I may never see my new great-grandson. Meanwhile, my heart breaks for my great-granddaughter who just wants to see her daddy. My grandson and his new wife are avoiding my family, so I'm not sure what to do. Should I speak to him or have nothing to do with him? To find out that answer, check out the New York Times or look on our website at digimentors.group. You can find it there, or go to digimentors.link/ NYT Read Along. We have a gift link to the column by Philip Galans, and we hope to have him on a show in the future. Here, look at all these ads that they have here, and this is the Fashion Week Diary and the Wows column, and we had on the show one of the writers and editors for
Katie.
For the wedding section, and that was a lot of fun.
Kate
And,
Doty.
yeah, Kate. She was terrific. And here's Amrit Malhotra and Aaron Dorbrand Lowe, and look at that really nice, colorful photograph there. And Marissa La Rochelle and Julio Lopez. All right, let's keep flipping through the paper. Here is real estate, and it's about how Black and Latino developers are struggling to expand. The book review cover is The Rogue and the Noir. Walter Mosley's new novel, Every Man a King, is a hard-boiled tale of billionaires, white nationalists, and a detective with a complicated past. The first two could have been about Mr. Trump. Of course, he's both those first two things, but he's not a detective with a complicated past, just a complicated past. And here's the Arts and Leisure cover, is about when art imitates art, and looming Supreme Court decision and its potential impact on museums. I'll want to read that later. But now, without further ado, let's get to what many of us have been wanting to talk about, and that's this very grand story about a grand building vanishing. The famed Hotel Pennsylvania, denied landmark status, is being torn down, and the demolition is happening, as you can see here. Neil, tell us about this. It's by Dan Barry, our friend. Photographs by Todd Heisler.
It is an incredible story, both the photographs and the history there. I actually want to let Dan do the talking. Give me a moment to bring the story back up. One of the things that the New York Times has done is allowed its writers to read their stories, to actually share that online. So let me do that, and let me just make sure that I'm getting the audio in.
Sure.
While you're
And here are the
flipping through that
room
article.
keys and trays from the hotel as part of a collection amassed by Stephen Lepore. Glenn Miller and his band performing at the hotel. His 1940 song Pennsylvania 65000 immortalized its phone number. A storied hotel once offered accessible urbanity, a sense of cosmopolitanism for the common folk. So Neil will pull that up, and this is just the way that Dan tells stories is so fascinating. You have to.
And he was a guest on our show in the fall as well, Sree.
Yes.
And that was an incredible, boon to us. He's a great storyteller. And one of the things he mentioned was that he actually does read the stories to himself when he writes them. He writes these long stories. This one clocks in 18 minutes. We're not going to hear the whole thing, but he actually reads the story to himself to make sure that it sounds right, that the flow is right. Or I think actually he said he reads it to his wife on the phone, and she proofs it for him that way.
We just want to point out, this was once the world's largest hotel. Hotel
Yes.
Pennsylvania in New York City. Right when you got off the train, you could see it.
Let's listen to Dan read at least the opening.
Hi, I'm Dan Barry. I'm a writer for the New York Times. I've seen the Hotel Pennsylvania pretty much all my life. So it's been there. It's been part of my interior cityscape for well more than a half century. And this time next year, it won't be there. It's the first thing that you would see as you came up the escalator from Penn Station out onto 7th Avenue. There across the street was this 22-story majestic building, and that was the Hotel Pennsylvania. It was always there. I think it was so much there that we often didn't really see it. Now it's shrinking before our eyes, bit by bit, floor by floor. When I began looking into the story at the beginning of February, it was down to 13 stories. By the time I finished the final draft, it was down to 10 stories. Bit by bit, floor by floor, the building that once rose 22 stories over Penn Station is shrinking before the city's very eyes. The black netting draped over its ever-diminishing brick is like a magician's handkerchief. Once removed, it will reveal nothing. Behold, the great disappearing act of the Hotel Pennsylvania. This isn't, or wasn't, just any building. This was once the largest hotel on Earth, with 2,200 rooms, shops, restaurants, its own newspaper, and a telephone number immortalized by the band leader Glenn Miller with a 1940 song, Pennsylvania 6 5000.
As our program gets underway, I see that there's every indication that Glenn and the boys are certainly glad to be back here at the Hotel Pennsylvania. Smiles on their faces, and even the first number says Pennsylvania 6 5000.
For which
That's the first 2 minutes of
Wow.
Dan reading, introducing his piece, and then reading the lead, which was incredible. And then you can see some of the pictures. I scrolled through the pictures that they had online. That image on the front page, a magician's hands with the gloves holding the building. Just really, really well done. Really well done.
And these are all collected by this fan named Stephen Lepore. A lot of the things you see, that was his collection of artifacts from the museum. I mean, not from the museum. It's now like a museum. It's the Hotel Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
All right,
I want to
folks.
give a shout out real quick. Let's see. To get the name right, it's Richard Wygand did the design work on that. Richard Wygand from the design team.
Nice. And thank you, Wayne Kamadoy, for letting us know. All right, we're going to close out the show by reading the poem as threatened before. We used to do this on a regular basis. And so I'm going to do that. But before we do that, we should just remind everyone that the show is almost every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We are taking next Sunday off as Neil is at South by Southwest. And then we'll be back on Sundays 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern. It's live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and then and also on our website, Digimentors.group. And as soon as it's off the air, it will replay. So do check it out. And we want to thank Saumya Grover for her wonderful production help. Thank you so much, Saumya, for that. And of course, Neil's our EP and occasional guest host. And we also want to thank our sponsor, our friends at Muckrack. Thank you for your support all of these years. And if you would like to sponsor the show, you can do so by getting in touch with us, Sree at Digimentors.group or Neil at Digimentors.group. And we're always looking for guests as well. So if you have an interesting story or a project you want to talk about, maybe this is one of the places you would like to check out. So let us know. And definitely go into Digimentors.group and check out the read-along section, because we have a lot of special treats there for you, including gift links, PDFs, things you can't find elsewhere. So check that all out. And now we're going to read poem number 1022 by Daniel Berzatsky. And I'm reading this cold, which I should never do. There is not much excess, and what there is barely perceptible. The blank ones disappear from our vision. No one notices until there is a dramatic decrease in surplus value. The war is born, and the blank ones disappear again. But really their disappearance is subjective. Some see no one, while others see everyone. For some, the extermination of the cancer is inseparable from the decreation of the city. Others associate the decreation with an unstoppable flow of leakage, while others associate the decreation with falling rates of profit and the barely perceptible appearance of the human body. Out of the dead refugee sprouts a breathing poem. Out of the dead soldier sprouts a breathing poem. Out of the dead city sprouts a breathing poem. But when the city disappears, so do the poems. And when the poems disappear, the dead are assassinated. Picture a heart covered in dust, and picture a poem sprouting out of it. Picture a heart covered in dust, and picture a child chasing it. Picture a bullet that kills a child, and picture the soldier who tosses the child into the sea. The soldier kisses the earth and says, "It's not my fault that people are being born and dying." The pastor calls out the names of the children to the congregants. To each name they respond, "Dead." Wow, what a poem. When the cold optics of domination are left unchallenged, the dead die twice. The cruel euphemism of profit and genocidal language of extermination meet their answer in Daniel Brozatsky's poem 1022. This is from a poem called Written After a Massacre in the Year 2018. Draws his inspiration from a poem about the Spanish Civil War. Neil, as I was reading this, so powerful. And the language of the poem becomes starker as it arrives at the last word, which sits alone on a line, dead, a devastating clarity. I thought this was about Ukraine. It could have been about any of our wars. And Daniel's a poet and translator from Spanish. His 2016 collection, The Performance of Becoming Human, won the National Book Award for Poetry. That is amazing. I'm definitely a fan of his work.
Rose captured the line, "But when the city disappears, so does the poem."
Yeah, beautiful. And Rose is a great poet and someone who's interested in poetry, does a lot of good stuff. So definitely check her out. Lakshmi, thank you for watching for 90 minutes. Wow, powerful and great poems, says Rose. Thank you all for watching. We are so grateful for this community of the New York Times read along, and we are blessed to have all of you in our lives. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you not this coming Sunday, but the Sunday after. Ron Thomas says, thank you so much for the Sunday treat. Tag a friend, folks. They can watch from the beginning right now on any of their platforms. Jonathan, too, getting up early in Phoenix. Wonderful show. Great echo of how the show began. Thank you very much, and thank you all. And my brother watching in Dubai. Great show, Neil and Sree. Our mom was such a loyal fan of the show. Thank you for watching. And I want Ron and my brother to connect if they haven't, both living in Dubai. Sree's back and all is right with the world. Great conversation. Thank you, Mary. Mary's podcast, check out all the stuff that she does. And Lakshmi, it's great to tune in. Tell your friends, everybody, every Sunday, except the upcoming one. And they can see the archives on my Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and of course on Digimentors.group. Thanks very much. And thanks, Neil, for a wonderful way to start our Sunday.
And Rose says, wonderful show. I see your dad and brother were watching. And let us know what you thought of the deep dive into the New York Times, if we should do it more frequently, get back to our roots a little bit. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.